I wasn't totally sold on the idea that it was actually worse than the Krakoan era until we started analyzing the situation. I was not sold that it was worse. I was pretty certain that it was actually, I don't know, marginally better than the end of Krakoa. But through that conversation, no, it's clear to me that this is actually a worse time period than the end of Krakoa. And that is a sad, sad, sad state of affairs.
Recently, we were asked if X-Men from the Ashes is already worse than Krakoa. And I think if you really delve into it, you almost have to admit that it is. And obviously, we're going to talk with our X-Men aficionado Doc today about this. We didn't think it could get worse than Krakoa. Of course, we are proven wrong very early on.
Yeah, I mean, look, I've had a long-standing axiom that I live my life by, and it is that if you don't think things could get worse, that merely means you lack sufficient imagination.
As bad as Vienna Krakoa is, and it's terrible, there's nothing really good or redeeming about that. You have to remember that Krakoa started from a foundation of excellence. House of X, Powers of 10 existed. Jonathan Hickman, R.B. Silva, Pepe the Raz reinvigorated the entire franchise, and people couldn't have been more excited for Krakoa in the new age of X-Men because it started out with a foundation of excellence. They have no foundation of excellence whatsoever to build off of in From the Ashes. It's just a clusterfuck.
Before they even got to announcements of titles, the rumors were already abounding that they couldn't find anybody to take on the job. That is not the place that you want to start your line-wide revamp from. Talented, creative people saying no thanks and passing on the opportunity to be in charge of the X line in the X office. You're already starting from negative publicity, people walking in the door with question marks on, hey, how bad is it if nobody wanted this job? This time around, like, there's not even promise to start with for hype. I mean, we started with announcements of creators that was a who's who of who cares, and were the best and most promising creatives involved in the entire thing was a Jed MacKay that had already started getting exposed for who he was through his Avengers and Blood Hunt run, and Gail Simone, who hasn't been relevant in 15 years. You have a Reclamation project and a wannabe who hasn't been yet.
That first year of the Krakoan era, and there certainly are some problems there, but there's some pretty quality books. You know, the X-Men book from Hickman, while uneven, the highs were very, very high. I remember getting the Children of the Vault story. That stuff was excellent. You know, Ben Percy's take on Wolverine was pretty exciting. X-Force was a solid read. Fallen Angels didn't last very long, but it was pretty good. You got the X-Men versus Fantastic Four little miniseries by Chip Zdarsky that was pretty exciting. We got the beginning of Hellions from Zeb Wells that ended up being excellent. Probably the best series that ever even came out during the Krakoan era. We haven't got anything, I think, that lives up to any of those books yet.
The best we've had so far was what? An issue of Uncanny X-Men by Gail Simone that we didn't hate.
I think the best series so far that feels like X-Men is probably X-Force, and I don't think that's as good as Ben Percy's X-Force run, at least at the beginning.
Absolutely
I think
not.
maybe the second best book after getting through the first 3 or 4 issues of X-Men and Uncanny, you know, and getting that second issue of Wolverine, you're like, it might be Phoenix. That's not good news because Phoenix isn't a good book.
Phoenix is an abysmal book with stolen art. When that's the best that you're getting here, you're not getting anything even worth your $4.90, your $3.99 or $4.99. Honest to God, the entire first 4 issues of all of these books aren't worth $4.99 combined. I wouldn't buy an entire lot of them for the cover price of one of these fucking issues.
But there's just no quality really there. It's like no one gives a shit. Everyone's asleep at the wheel.
The minute that Tom Brevoort got announced as the line editor for this new era of X-Men, everybody's like, oh, so he's on his retirement gig now. And
Dave Buckley had to sit him down and be like, listen, this isn't optional. You're not doing Avengers anymore. You're going to have to do X-Men because we fucked up the line so bad. We need somebody that we have faith can fix it. Unfortunately, that's not the case.
That is not the message you want to send to the readership when you're trying to convince them to come back. And this is like straight from the horse's mouth. This isn't like innuendo and rumor that we heard, Tom Brevoort himself said, oh yeah, they had to force me to take this job. Even the editor doesn't even have anything to prove because he doesn't give a shit.
It took a long time before we got to that end stage where your best writers are Kieran Gillen, Al Ewing, and Jerry fucking Duggan. And your entire lineup of writers really in the X-Men office of Krakoa just suck. We're starting out there now. I would say Kieran Gillen's a better writer than Gail Simone. Al Ewing's probably a better writer than Jed McKay at this point. We've already got Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing. We've already got Mark fucking Russell in here, Stephanie Phillips. We've already got Jason Lowe, Declan fucking Shalvey. We've already scraped the bottom of the barrel. We are starting out with the worst possible cadre of writers that you could get. It took years before even Jordan White and the Legion of Doofuses had to lower themselves to having a writer's room of like Vita Ayala, Leah Williams, and fucking Steve Orlando.
The starting point from the Ashes is as bad or worse, talent-wise, as the end stage Krakoa. And that is not a position that anyone would consider enviable by any stretch. The best you can hope for is mediocre. And they're not really anywhere close to even hitting that. All of these books are somehow below the quality of even X-Men Red, Jerry Duggan's. At least Jerry Duggan had a couple of decent issues periodically on X-Men, even when he was trying to turn the fucking team into Voltron. This, though, the first issue of Uncanny X-Men, where they're fighting a fucking dragon for absolutely no reason, except for Gambit's going to need a favor from it down the line? What?
Also, it seems like every writer that's come in here and said, you know what the biggest problem with X-Men right now is? We don't have enough new mutants to put in here. So if you go over to fucking Jed McKay's X-Men book, there's 3 new mutants that are living with them in freaking Alaska. You go to Uncanny X-Men with Gail Simone. The Outliers, I think there's 4 of them. You go to Exceptional X-Men, there's 3 more there. If you go to NYX, I think there's another one there. And there's already too many named mutants as it is. There needed to be a culling of a herd, and they've decided to make more shitty mutants.
The idea was, hey, let's try to find some sense of normalcy again. And what do? They make it more complicated, more convoluted, and add a bunch of characters that nobody really cares to even learn about, much less acknowledge exist, that the readers have no particular interest in. It's never that they did something wrong like they did during the Krakoan era. It's merely that they haven't been allowed to do enough of it yet. They're not changing course. They're pressing the fucking accelerator.
You make a great point there. I mean, X-Men refuses to be anything other than a continuation of Krakoa. The reason that they stopped the Krakoan era was because it played itself out. There wasn't really any sales associated with it, and X-Men needed a revamp to go in a new direction. This new direction is just a continuation of Krakoa, but now instead of getting the people that helped create the Krakoan era, and Jerry Duggan was certainly there at the very beginning stages, we're now getting Colin Kelly and Jackson Lanzing's opinion on Krakoa. We're getting Declan Shalvey's opinion on Krakoa. We're getting Mark Russell's opinion on Krakoa. We're getting Eve Ewing's opinion on Krakoa. It ends up being a copy of a copy, and it wasn't good to begin with, especially at that end state. No one wanted to see this story continue out, but every single book in From the Ashes is about Krakoa.
It was really clear to me when they started this, the only reason that they were leaving Krakoa was because they were forced to buy senior management. That was obvious that to everybody reading from that first issue on, that this was nothing but a temper tantrum where they're not going to change what they're doing. They're merely going to state that they're doing something else while continuing to do the exact same thing. It's Krakoa without the island. And it was very, very clear from the first, issue of this that that's what it was going to continue to be. You could tell whenever they announced the end of the Krakoan era that none of the editors, none of the writers, none of the creatives, and nobody in comic books at all, like on the creative side, said, hey, yeah, we needed to put an end to that. Every one of them pitched a bitch about it online So it was very, very clear that they were only doing it under absolute and complete duress.
And I think that's why the Jeff Thorne X-Force book feels so different and actually feels like X-Men, because it has very little to do with Krakoa. Yes, you still get the Captain Britain, Rachel Summers shit in there, whatever. But it's them just going out there, finding things that are broken and fixing them and saving people. That's a fucking X-Men book. Generally speaking, it doesn't have anything to do with Krakoa, but it's literally front and center in every other book out there.
Absolutely. And it's not going to change either, because the people in charge never wanted it to change. And then the minute they get the opportunity to continue doing that thing that they didn't want to stop doing in the first place, the minute that anybody turns their attention towards anything else, it was 100% guaranteed that they would just continue it under a different name. And that's all this is. It's Krakoa in everything but name.
Like, there's never going to be any buzz because you forgot to lay a foundation of excellence and what separates this new era of X-Men and why you should go read it.
They're just doing the exact same shit. And you know what?
I'm waiting for the Hellfire Gala to come back. Who do you think's bringing it back? My money's on Mark Russell.
My money's on Gale. Gale seems like the type that is still obsessed with prom, probably because nobody asked her. By the time we're halfway through this From the Ashes era, I will lay money they end up back on the fucking island.
The one thing I think that is crystal clear about all of this, and what definitely makes X-Men From the Ashes way worse than Krakoa already, Tom Brevoort gives zero fucks about X-Men. He does not want to be editing this line of books. He doesn't want to be in charge of this. He doesn't care about X-Men lore. He doesn't care about the characters. He doesn't understand the brand. And he's just sitting there in a chair, but it's fucking empty.
All he's got to do is somehow find a way to not get fired for the next 4 years. And then he can go and pick up his 401k and maybe if he's got some stock options, cash them in. And in the meantime, he doesn't have to give a shit. He just has to make it not abysmal.
Get out the right amount of books. He's got to do 12 to 15 books a month.
Yeah, as long as he satisfies whatever schlub in the marketing department and the sales department of Marvel is actually making the decisions on what's getting published and what's not getting published. As long as he keeps that dude happy, he's fine.
But I think we could have all seen this coming. Obviously Tom Brevoort does have a reputation because Avengers did turn around under him. It reached heights that it had never done before. Do I think it's strictly because of Brevoort? No, I think it's because of a lot of what Bendis was doing there. But the last few years, like when's the last time we had a good Avengers event? He's the guy that put, Dan Slott in charge of Iron Man. We got that Iron Man, 2020 event or whatever that stupid thing was. He's the one that put Dan Slott in charge of Fantastic Four. We got that Avengers, Fantastic Four, Empire crossover thing that happened. It's not like the Avengers or any of those titles were doing well over the last 5 years of Tom Brevoort's stewardship either. So I think this was completely predictable. But you can definitely tell he cares less about X-Men characters and what goes on there than even he did on Avengers. And he clearly didn't care that much about that either.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that he didn't give Dan Slott an Avengers title or an X-Men title shows that he doesn't give a shit because Slott is his go-to guy for everything. He didn't even care enough to bug his buddy to come over and do another shitty run over here. The man is full on IDGAF at this point. And
we call it ROAD in the military, right? Retired on active duty.
Exactly. And he's not going to change. He's not going to alter course. He's not going to try to seek out new creative people. He's just going to call the people that'll answer the phone for him. And that's going to be your Gail Simone's, your Jed McKay's, your Colin Kelly's and Jackson Lanzig's.
Definitely expect a Chris Cantwell X-Men book soon.
Oh yeah, it's just a matter of time at this point. Would I say that this is worse than the Krakoan era? Yes. I'd say that the starting point on From the Ashes, it is absolutely orders of magnitude worse than the Krakoan era was, and there's not really any effort even being made to consider trying to fix that problem. Said we're going to keep getting more of the same till Tom Brevoort turns 65, cashes in his chips and goes the fuck home, or until somebody that actually gives a shit about X-Men accidentally ends up in that office, because the only way that that's going to happen is by pure accident.
Do you want to say thank you very much to Doc for having this conversation that started over on the Patreon? It was one of our Q&A questions last week. I thought it was interesting enough that we should expand upon it, do a full video. Had a lot of fun here. If you would like the entire conversation, because we did edit it down here for YouTube, and if you would like to hear the original question in the Q&A, you can go to the Patreon. There's a link in the video description. You've got the Doc Unfiltered show. You've got the Doc Q&A. You've got the Harder Not show with Jim, Geek Fix with Aaron Sparrow. You got lots of exclusive videos over there. Look for the Doc is Right tier on Think Critical Patreon.